Any long-time listener to this podcast knows I have a very holistic bent to golf, and I feel like there's more to it than just hands and feet. So I love to cross-pollinate. And my guest today, this week, is Dan Orlovsky, a guy who I've had massive admiration for, over recent years, Dan. So I'm so excited to have you on my show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Super excited to be with you. I love golf myself, even though it's not part of my athletic background, so to speak, but very excited to be here, Mark.
And for the folks who are listening to this on audio, if you go
Yeah.
look for this on YouTube, there he is. He's awfully dapper. We've got him between ESPN hits for NFL Live. So we'll make this quick, Dan. First off, just let's put you into context. Please tell us about you, young guy growing up in Connecticut, plays in the NFL eventually, now on one of the, arguably the biggest sporting network in the world. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's been a crazy life journey, so to speak. Like you said, I grew up in Connecticut. I was a sport kid. I played, I guess, like the three traditional American sports. I was big football, baseball, basketball, and then football. Baseball was my first love. Football became kind of what ended up being my college journey. I actually was playing high school baseball and football, and flipped a coin one day. My dad was like, "Hey," I was a sophomore. He's like, "These colleges are going to want you to like make a decision at some point." Flipped a coin, ended up playing football, and went from there to play at the University of Connecticut, which is my home state, my home school. Probably one of the best decisions I ever made. Had a ton of great life lessons and learning lessons there. I tell people all the time, like, I went to school, and this isn't good advice, but I went to school for football. Everyone was like, "What's your plan B?" And I told them I don't have one. If plan A doesn't work out, I think of a different plan A type of mindset. And so go there and was part of some really cool stuff there. I ended up getting drafted in 2005 to the Lions in the 5th round. And I went from the Lions to the Houston Texans to the Indianapolis Colts to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, back to the Lions to the Rams, and played for 12 years and just had the time of my life in that 12-year period. And it was better than anything I could imagine as a kid, and some ups and some downs. And then, got into doing television for ESPN and football, and I absolutely love it now. So it's been a very cool kind of sports/athletic journey.
I like everything about you, bar the fact that me being a Falcons fan, you played for the Bucks. So we'll let you slide on that one for the big NFC South rivalry. Hey, I want you to speak about that some, because a lot of the golfers watching this are aspirants. They might want to go to college, or they might want to turn pro, or listening to this, of course. And a lot of us hear about purpose and knowing who you are. And you very candidly admitted that, look, I went to college to play football. I know what I want to do. I'd like you to build on that a bit more, Dan, because I feel like so many athletes go to college and maybe they want to become a PGA Tour professional or an LPGA professional, but they're kind of wishy-washy about the thing. They're like, well, maybe I've got to fall back, maybe I don't. It sounded to me like your singularity really sort of set you on the path to the NFL eventually, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think part of it, Mark, was I remember being probably right around the age of 12, give or take a year or something. And my dad would say to me, "You're going to end up playing on Sundays."
Yeah.
And at that age, I didn't even know what he meant. I was like, "Sundays? I play on Fridays, Dad," like mindset.
Yeah.
And I think part of it was like him starting to paint that picture in my mind. And then the next part of it was it becoming very clear to me of what it was going to take, like what it was actually going to take to even give myself the chance to have the chance to have the chance. And that was, I was tall and I could throw.
Yeah.
That's who I was as an athlete, but I wasn't very athletic. I was slow. I was heavy footed. And I remember my high school coach like making, it abundantly clear to me, like, you got to attack weaknesses. Like, you have strengths. You have to find a way to attack your weaknesses. You have to understand that they're real and not run from them.
Yeah.
You can't use them as crutches, and you've got to be willing to attack them. And that was me, starting to jump rope and wear, weighted ankle wraps to try to get more athletic, and working on my athleticism because that wasn't a strength of mine. And I think over the years, what happened for me was my weaknesses became confidence boosters because I knew I had worked so hard at the things that people told me were my weaknesses that they no longer were and or would be. So I think it started with that. When it comes to like the college journey, like what became something of a calling card for me was, and I have kids now, and I tell this to my kids now, like everybody wants, I was willing to do.
Yeah.
Like all my teammates wanted to go to the NFL, and all my teammates wanted to play really well. But if I wasn't willing to do what they were willing to do, then they have an advantage on me. So like it became this very much so thing of like, I'm willing to not go to this party because I'm going to go work out. I'm willing to not go to this spring break because I'm going to stay home and throw. Like it became very much so of like, I don't care what you want. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to give up? If this is what you really want, Dan, and it was like a me versus me thing on that journey. And I had to be honest with myself, and it became an obsession. It really did. It became like every day. And I even joke with my wife nowadays, because I tell her, sports in a way brainwashed me a little bit in a good way, or like I can't really go enjoy an afternoon unless I feel like I've earned the right to, and sports taught me that, and I think part of it was I couldn't feel good about the day unless I had felt I had earned the right to go chase down my dream or chase down my goal. If I earned the right to do that. And I think that was a big part of the journey for me.
For the folks watching, you can see me writing feverishly because he's dropping wisdom and nuggets on us here. I want to back up one real fast before I pivot some. Dan, you mentioned your dad kind of prophesying over you, saying, hey, you're going to play Sundays. And for our international fans, the NFL plays on a Sunday. Fridays is high school football time. Saturdays is obviously college. There's something to that. And but I've seen plenty of parents who look at their young golfer, boy or girl, and says to them, hey, you're going to be a pro one day. You can win the Masters. You can do whatever. But what you share to say, okay, I took that prophecy to heart and I went and invested. I put legs underneath this thing by everything you did. I think that's kind of where a lot of athletes sort of fall short some because they rest on like, okay, I'm talented. And then they just hope everything comes to them. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were moments, with my relationship with my dad that, I didn't like it. Like when he would come home, I remember again in those teen years, and he would be like, did you work out today? Or did you throw today? Or did you run today? And he would be like, someone else did. Like, someone else did. And you can't, and these are kind of some of the messages that I share with my kids nowadays. Like, you can't tell me that you want to go play in the NFL and then not do everything that you are in control of to go play in the NFL. Like, you can't tell me that. And then it got to a point where my dad would be like, listen, this is maybe 13, 14 years old. My dad would be like, you don't get to do the things you want to do until you do the things you have to do.
Yeah.
So you want to go over your friend's house to play video games on a Friday afternoon at school? Great. You have to go do your hour workout or whatever, and again, I didn't like that at that time, but I sit back and I'm like, my goodness, the habits that built for me were great. And I think there's just that reality of, I say this to my kids all the time, guys, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Wanting to go do something doesn't matter. It just doesn't. There's 8 billion. How are you going to be different? How are you going to separate yourself? And I was fortunate enough that, those habits that were developed for me in that work ethic were a real big difference maker for me.
You're preaching, Reverend. You meet some folks. So folks, what I did, I reached out to Dan and we texted back and forth. And I said to him, I want to characterize, because you played at the highest of high levels and you've encountered some of the greatest athletes over the line of scrimmage or even on your team. And so I said to you, and I've done this once or twice before with athletes from other sporting codes, just to get your take on what makes champion, what categorize,
Yeah.
and you hit me with some here on my text, and it sounds to me like you've already talked about the first one where you were like, you need to prioritize improvements, because you
Yeah.
said, well, you could lay at home and play Xbox, or you can get out there in the gym. So is that prioritizing improvement? Is that putting the goal in front of everything else?
100. I think it's the putting the goal as everything, yes, falls underneath that umbrella. I think like Tom Brady's the perfect example of it in regards to this. Tom made the decision somewhere around the age of 20 that he wanted to go be the very best that he could go become. And every decision from then on fell under the umbrella of, does this help me go do that? If it does, then I'll do it. If it doesn't, then I won't do it. And some people scoff at that, and that's not for everybody. But if we truly sit here and say, like, if you're a teenage athlete and you say, I want to go play college sports, that's then the reality is you don't get to go play college sports unless you place the improvement of your craft at the very top. You don't, because there is somebody who will. There is just the, it's math. It's the law of the world. There's someone who will. And unless you prioritize improvement, because improvement takes a lot of time. And I would always say this to guys when they came into the NFL when they were young, because everyone comes in and thinks that they're going to play 10 years. And I go, do not think that. Try to have one good day. Like go out into training camp and have one good practice. And if you have a good practice, your mindset tomorrow, have one good practice. And I told them eventually you would sit back and look back and go, oh, I just had a good month. Wait, I was a 6th round draft pick and I made the team. And then you look back, oh, I had a good season. And then all of a sudden you play for 10 years. It's just that prioritizing the importance over, did I get to the exact spot that I wanted to?
Yeah. Everything you say there, I can see you live that out, because look, maybe this is mutual admiration here, but when I watch your analysis on ESPN, you seem better prepared than anyone else doing it right now. It's like you leave no stone unturned. And I love that. And
Thank
so
you.
to your observation, number 2 of great achievers, and that's like being self-aware. Now, you talked about Tom Brady. I've never met him. He has, I guess as you do, an insatiable desire to be better. It's like he knows exactly who he is. Like, I'm a long-suffering Falcons fan, right? So you remember that Super Bowl. And I remember watching that Super Bowl at home with my wife. All the friends had left, and the Falcons had the big lead. And then there was a questionable decision made, and the network cut to a shot of Brady on the sideline. And you could just see it in this dude's eyes. And I looked at my wife, Tracy, and as if to say, oh no, it's happening. And he didn't go for the home run stuff. He just dumped balls off and just drove them down the field, dumped balls off and drove them down the field. He knew exactly who he was. And the higher the pressure was, the bigger the moment was, the more he just did what he knew he could do. Is that self-aware?
Absolutely. And I think it's even that, I think that is like the pinnacle picture, right? Imagery wise. I think there is this, even with youth sports nowadays, and certainly in America, there's this belief that if you're not perfect, you stink. You know, I feel like there's that in pro sports as well. Part of the reason why I got into my job is I wanted people to know that there were other great quarterbacks outside of Tom Brady, but there were other great coaches outside of Bill Belichick. And we live in this world where, like, if you're not the best, you stink. And I think that there's this beauty in embracing the self-awareness of that there are weaknesses to your game or to your personality or to your leadership skills, or there are flaws. And the people who are self-aware of them and are willing enough to like understand them and embrace them, that's the only way to improve. That goes back to point 1. Like, if you're not aware that you have warts or flaws or weaknesses, there's no way to get better at them because you don't believe that they exist. And I think the self-awareness And I think once you embrace that and then are willing to work at it, that's when you become so much more self-confident in whatever and or whoever you are.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's football or golf or tennis or pickleball, whatever. It's the same thing. It's life, really.
Right.
I want to pivot and get away from your list real fast. You've talked about prioritizing improvement, being self-aware. Your next one was being prepared and staying present. But I want to pivot real fast and talk about being present. And you use the word where it's like you've got to almost be in the situation where you're aware of who you are, and in the situation now, goodness me, I'm uncomfortable, but I've got to find a way to somehow be comfortable in the situation. Now I look at quarterbacks, and I have the utmost admiration for you guys because you can be myopic, and there's mayhem going around you, in front, side, and on the back of you sometimes. Yet you stay singular and you look at your goal. So I can only imagine how uncomfortable that situation is.
Yeah.
It's some of you greats. You look like, oh, it's just another thing. You could get smashed at any time, but you're looking comfortable in the situation. That's huge in golf too. Could you please talk about that for me?
Yeah, I think you got to be a little sick in the head to really enjoy it. You got to really enjoy those moments. There's that age-old question of like, are you born with it or is it developed? I don't know that answer. I feel it's probably a little bit of both. I think some people are born with it at a higher level, or some people develop it as a higher level. Like I think quarterback in golf, pitcher in baseball, point guard in basketball, like those are very similar, I feel, roles, because oftentimes you feel by yourself.
Yeah.
You feel alone. You feel, and there's nothing that can replace that weight and that pressure. And I think like the more you're in the moment and the more you can feel prepared for the moment and then have success in the moment, the more the normal that moment feels and or that situation feels. Playing quarterback was the coolest thing in the world to me. Like it was the greatest, because my personality, I remember being a teenager and, like people being like, you like to be the center of attention. That was just my personality. And in being a quarterback, I loved it because you're the center of attention. I would imagine it's very similar as a golfer. Like you're the center of attention, you're by yourself, you're out there. And so I think that like the being uncomfortable or being comfortable in uncomfortable situations is almost walking backwards to the starting point. Like, how do you find ways to find comfort in discomfort? Experience, reps, high pressure situations, preparation, self-confidence. Like all those things don't happen in the light. They happen in the dark. They happen during lonely hours. I tell people all the time, like, you can't be great at anything unless you enjoy the lonely journey of it.
Dolly, that's the truth too. I want to talk about self-confidence and how you find it through faith. But before I go there, I have to ask this, because you talk about being on an island and the quarterback, all the spotlight's on you. And golf, it's the same kind of thing. And you can't hand the ball off or call timeout or whatever. You just got to go ahead and play. And in both crafts, both disciplines, failure is inevitable. And I grew massive admiration for you when you poked fun at yourself for an event, the safety that took place against the Vikings in 08. And I love this guy. This was the difference in the game. Eventually, you guys lost the game was by 2 points, which was the safety where I guess you misheard a referee or something. But I want you to talk and help the golfer listening to this, or even the athlete going, failure happens. You got to get up and you got to move along, kind of thing. So help with a mindset there, please.
Yeah. I think that the undefeated reality in sports is that you are going to fail. Sports are measured by a win and a loss. And it's the undefeated, inevitable father time reality that you are going to fail. And I think when every athlete comes to the point of understanding that there's not a single thing that they can do to change that, it's much easier to understand. Now, I'm not saying it's easier to accept, but I think it's easier to understand. And then that's when you can start like to really appreciate the process of minimizing the opportunity of failure. Like it is going to happen, but you can either run from the minimization of the opportunity or run to it. And I think that goes to your preparation, your work ethic, your, how ready you are for the moment. But, this goes back a little bit to the faith, that we haven't really dove into just yet, Mark, is like, I had gotten to the point, and I think a lot of athletes need to get to this point where they can look at themselves in the mirror. I always tell my kids, like, the mirror is one of the greatest things ever created and or invented, because I got to the point where I looked at myself and I was like, I've done everything I possibly could. I've done everything I possibly could. And if it doesn't work out, the great plans that I have in my mind, if it doesn't work out and I've done everything I possibly could, God's got something bigger for me. Mm-hmm. And I think you could, if you're not a person of faith, you can look at that and go, I've done everything I possibly could. And I've got these great plans in my mind. And if failure happens, it happens. There's nothing else I could have done. There's nothing else that I could have done. Now, the chances are it won't, just because that's how sports work. Like the failure is minimized. But I think once you get to the point that it's just inevitable, and that you become more obsessed with improvement than result.
I'm hearing you and I'm feeling what you're saying, because like you spent, I think it was 12 years in the NFL, and you played college football, that's 4 years, and obviously high school. So we're looking, north of 20 something years playing football, right? And when I moved to the United States, Lord forbid, I didn't know I was going to be an announcer for CBS on the PGA Tour. I was an aspirant young golf instructor, college golf coach. And I remember for like 12 years, I was giving lessons on a range in Columbus, Georgia in the middle of summer, morning till night, sweating my rear end off, wondering, is it worth it? Making money by the hour. I was helping golfers. Sure. I was successful. But looking back on all of this now, Dan, it was kind of like my desert experience, like like Moses wandering around the wilderness for 40 years, because it uniquely qualified for me for what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I listen to you and you talk about your faith in believing that I'm going to put the work in, maximize myself, and wherever the chips fall, that's where they fall, because I trust my convictions. And I listen to you, I watch you on television, and I see it's like all that information, those things you learned en route to where you are, have qualified you for who you actually were supposed to be. Yes?
1,000%. And, and it's, I'm better at this than I was as a player. And that's hard. I'm better at telling people what happened and or should happen than actually doing it. Do I wish it was flipped? Of course I do. But that's just, I'm better at this. And I think like having, been a part of all those different teams and learned under all these different coaches and learned under all these different offenses and been in all these different locker rooms and seen all these different personalities and the ones who did it at the highest level and the ones who should have done it at the highest level but didn't. Like you're just like this vantage point of information and experience that you can kind of constantly pull at and tap into to try to do the best job, not only at ESPN, but, I've mentioned multiple times, I have kids. I have 11-year-old sons and a 7-year-old daughter that you're trying to, kind of use sports as the vehicle to let them win at life, essentially. And it certainly kind of brought me on this journey that made me a significantly better person and husband and father. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. The folks are glued to this. I certainly am. I've kept you for a long time already, and I'm only halfway through your list. Staying present sort of makes sense. And then you just wrote sponges, and you talking about being in the locker room and being under these coaches and stuff. You being a sponge, you're picking up the whole way along there. This is something in your experience that every great achiever is. Yes.
Absolutely. Because there's so many different ways to do one thing. Mm-hmm. Like in the football world, like there's so many different ways for us as a quarterback. There's different ways for me to do something like what we call the 3-step drop. You know, we take the ball and we go 1, 2, 3. There's so many different ways to do that one drop.
Mhm.
You know, what foot is forward, right or left? Do you keep your shoulders square or parallel? Do you keep your head downfield for a step, or do you peek to the right? You know, throwing right or left, where's your front shoulder? Do you hitch or do you put your back? I mean, there's so many, unless you're a sponge to all those different ways and watching multiple people do it differently, I don't think you can ever get to the point where you figure out what's the best way for you to do it. Like, what's the best way for you then to go operate that on a consistent basis? It's not all that different than golf. Like, I remember, you know, I started playing golf really like my rookie year in the NFL. I wasn't good, but I would play with guys who were, and I would watch them play. And I'd be like, oh, that's how he hits that shot, or that's how he hits that. I do it nowadays when I watch golf. You know, oh, that's how those guys go through their play. And I just think like the more of that, and then in the locker room, it's like everyone gravitates towards that guy in the locker room. Like, so how does he handle wins, and how does he handle losses? What does he do after a good practice? What does he do after a bad practice? How does he handle the people who are cleaning the locker room? How does he talk to them? Like, when he comes to work and he stops at the security gate, you know, is there interaction with, like, just the way you could be a sponge of information and personality and appearance, I guess. There's so many different ways to appreciate how people go about different layers and levels of their life that could be a positive impact on ours, not only just in our craft, but in the way we carry ourselves.
I have to ask this follow-up, because in golf there is an influx of information, almost too much so. It's like, and as a former coach, full-time coach, I run from it, where it's like the coach is almost coaching the athlete out of the golfer. And now there's so much information on podcasts like this one, or on YouTube, or wherever it might be, Twitter, Instagram, that there's all this stuff, and people want to be sponges, but they're just taking everything in and never being themselves. You are uniquely Dan Orlovsky. How? Does this just come to you naturally?
No, it didn't come naturally. You know, part of it is because, you know, I think that while I'm uniquely me, I have been impacted by so many people, you know, and I've been mentored directly or indirectly by so many people. I think it goes back a little bit to like embracing who you are, embracing the flaws and the strengths, the pros and the cons. I think it goes back to, I think, you know, like there is a reality, and it's okay to sit there and be like, that person's better at that than me.
Yeah.
So how can I become better at it? You know, like I've had so many moments where I've watched a person be a parent and be like, you handled that better than I would. Like, so how do I take something from that for the next moment for me? Or, you know, like, yeah, sports. So like you were so much better running that play than I would. I would do that as a young player. I would sit there and just watch and be like, all right, this is what I would do on this play. You didn't do it that way. Why? Hey, why did you do it that? Why did you put your eyes there? Why did you throw the ball with that type of touch? You know, and it's just, I think like while I've become uniquely me, I think I have stolen from or borrowed from others in so many different aspects.
I say to so many youngsters that I teach, in fact, even good golfers, you must steal with your eyes. After every PGA Tour event, when I was a college coach, I'd be like, bro, what did you guys see? What did you guys learn? Because people don't do that nowadays, because we come out with this sense of entitlement, like, hey, I'm good, I'm in college. And your final point was no entitlement.
No entitlement.
I'll let you.
No. You're not entitled to anything. You're not. Like, you're not entitled to a win. You're not entitled to a loss. You're not entitled to, if you show up getting better, you're not entitled to, like, you, I think, have to understand in the grand scheme of things that there's been someone like you before and there will be someone like you afterwards. And just because your mom or your dad did this, or you wear these school colors, or you did practice yesterday. You're not entitled to anything. And I think that allows you to be really present and focused, you know, and like be very much so like in the moment of like, you just because you're here doesn't mean that the person who's there, you are more entitled than them at anything or to anything, you know. And I think that like if you have the mindset that no one owes you anything, like no one owes you anything, I think that's like so much more of a go-getter mindset rather than a sit back and like see what happens mindset.
I somehow have a sense within, I'm going to prophesy over you that this podcast is going to be the precursor to a Dan Orlovsky motivational life skills book. Just all right. I'm going to let you put a bow on this conversation. I've kept you for long, but I want to tee you up a little bit. We talked about it some, and there was an event this season. It was 2023 for the folks who are listening to this podcast down the way. It was a horrid situation in a Buffalo Bills game. Damar Hamlin goes down. Now, I'm in live TV. I know what this is like. You're on the desk at ESPN. And we're in an environment where you've got to sort of toe the corporate line a little bit. Yet we have the courage of our convictions. And they cut to you, and everyone's just aghast at the circumstance. There's a guy down on the field. The game is essentially stopped. So now they need Phil. They come to you, and you're like, well, all I know is that I believe in Jesus, and at this situation, I would pray. And the whole set fell silent, and off you went and prayed in front of millions of people watching you. Now, Dan, that bravo, first off, man, but the courage of your convictions and then the presence of mind to get up and do that, I think that is like the recipe for success for everyone. So I want you, please, to sort of see us off with that marching order, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, Damar is, you know, healthy and recovered. Damar's actually back playing football. He's been medically cleared, which is incredible. And it's been amazing to see God kind of use that situation. You know, like it would, for me, it was in this moment, I had heard and I kept hearing like thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. And I had just thought to myself, we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Like we hear that all the time, myself included. I say it all the time. And I just thought like, it just felt like a moment where someone should actually just pray. Don't say it, just pray. And, you know, one of my first years in Detroit, so I grew up going to a traditional church life and then got away from God for a little bit, you know, during high school or college. And, you know, then I get drafted to Detroit and I'm around these people and I'm watching like a guy like John Kitna and Dave Wilson, who was our team chaplain, and Josh McCown, Mike Frey, other players. And I'm watching these guys and they're maniac competitors like me. They're tough. I guess they're stereotypical, like men, so to speak. And that might sound silly, but like they were like me in that, but then like spoke glowingly about their wives and their children and their marriage and their life. And they didn't like swear a ton and they weren't going to like live chaotic lifestyles. And I was just sitting there going, I've never seen anything like this. And throughout those early couple years in the NFL, I was discipled and mentored by them. And I think probably one of the most impactful messages that we kind of dove into was our team chaplain, Dave Wilson, teaching us what a real man is. And he used REAL as an acronym. And the first one was reject passivity. And that has been like a really big deal to me, like to reject passivity and the comfort of stuff. And so in the moment, thoughts and prayers. And I thought to myself, like, someone should pray, right? And then I was like, Dan, pray. And as I started to have that feeling of you should pray right now, I got scared. Because to your point, we live in a world where not everyone likes prayer, not everyone believes in it. We work for companies that may not, you know, want that on their air or whatever. And Mark, in the moment where I was like scared to do it, that's when like this incredible peace came over me. And I'm not sitting here saying like I heard the audible voice of God, but I felt and heard and thought like, just trust God. Just trust God. And that's what led me to pray. And I didn't know like what I was going to say. And I was just honest with the prayer. And it was just for Damar. It wasn't for anyone else. It was, I'm praying for this young man right now. And it was just trying to reject, and everyone has been like, that was so courageous. And my big thing was like, it was just an opportunity to live out faith. It was, a lot of us say it was just an opportunity for us to live out faith. And it's been amazing to see what God has done through it. And I'm thankful that DeMar is healthy and back to doing something that he loves. And I'm thankful that, God's used that moment.
I'm thankful that you would share it. But now you've given us the R of real man. Tell us what E, A, and L are, please.
Yeah. Engage, like engage, be present. Like with your family, with your wife, be engaged. Don't just be there, but be engaged in anything that you're doing. Mm-hmm. A is accept responsibility. Whether good or bad, you accept the responsibility. And then L is lead courageously. Don't just lead courageously. And for me, that was like a really, really, really big deal. The real and the acronym, it's something that I've really tried to make like a life mission of mine, is being a real man, and I think that like, it doesn't, I don't want to say like we've lost sight of that in a way, but I feel like we have, and I think that like the more that we learn about what a real man is, not kind of what I guess has been propped up, it's changed my life for sure.
Yeah, well, look, it's a life changer. Like I said, and like everyone who listens to this knows, I'm holistic, and every one of those elements you shared: reject passivity, engage and be present, accept responsibility, and lead courageously. I mean, those are golf lessons, they're football lessons, they're life lessons. And I appreciate you sharing that, and thank you.
My pleasure, man. I love them.
Okay, I know you've made more fans with this thing, so I know folks are going to want to find you. Where do they go on social media, that sort of stuff, please?
Yeah, I'm all over Twitter and Instagram. I don't know. I'm pretty easy to find on that because my last name's not the easiest. So I don't know the exact, it's either D Orlovsky or Dan Orlovsky 7 type stuff, but I'm pretty easy to find.
Between Orlovsky and Immelman, you and I got this stuff covered, bro. We really. Dan, thanks for your time. Thanks so very much. It's been a thrill, and I appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
A blast. Thanks, Mark.